For This Week in Washington, I'm Brian Darling. Reclaiming conservatism, voter fraud, and guns in the District of Columbia are the three big issues this week in Washington. On March 27th at noon at the Heritage Foundation, former Oklahoma Congressman Mickey Edwards will speak at an event titled Reclaiming Conservatism: How a Great Political Movement Got Lost and How It Can Find Its Way Back. Congressman Edwards will argue that conservatives today have abandoned their principles and become champions of that which they once most feared. Edwards will say that the imperial presidency has gutted the system of checks and balances, abandoned due process, and trampled upon civil liberties. Conservatives should never forget that the two bedrocks of the conservative movement are individual liberty and limited government. Hans von Spakovsky, a former member of the Federal Elections Commission and counsel for civil rights at the Justice Department, has published a new study titled Stolen Identities, Stolen Votes, a case study in voter impersonation. This study discusses voter impersonation in Brooklyn between 1968 and 1982 to affected races for the U.S. Congress and the New York State Senate and Assembly. Conservatives support efforts to make sure that citizens vote only once in our federal elections and that non-citizens are not given the privilege of voting this fall. The Supreme Court will hear arguments this Tuesday on whether the Second Amendment, right to keep and bear arms, will be restored to the residents of the District of Columbia. The Second Amendment right to own a gun should be treated like the First Amendment's right to free exercise of speech and religion, with the strictest of scrutiny. Conservatives support the constitutional right of the residents of the district to own a firearm in the home for personal protection. That's This Week in Washington. I'll see you next week. For more information, log on to heritage.org and stay tuned next week for more news and information.